Yeah, my screen is visible, right? Sudeep?
Yes,
Yes. Okay. So, so I thought of like taking this session because to like give what all concepts you have to cover to go to like cover all the full stack concepts uh, to go to a stage where like you can call yourself a full stack developer, right? So this session is going to be dense with we'll be like going through a lot of topics and like what all things to cover in each technologies, right? So obviously these are the major technologies, so in that also we will deep dive into like what all concepts will be like we have to cover to get to a full stack developer stage, right? So the major technologies covered in this thing will be HTML, CSS. Bulma is a CSS framework. JavaScript is the major programming language for the full stack development. And then like MERN means MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. So this is a full stack framework, kind of like a term. Okay. And then like all the technologies here are dependent on JavaScript. Okay. So along with these technologies, we should also need GitHub. This is for versioning and like collaborating on the code base, right? And then Vercel and Render are the deployment platforms which you have to like kind of like need to like deploy both front end and back end. Okay, so let's get started. So who's called as a full stack web developer, right? So a full stack means a person who's working in both front end development and back end development. Okay. So front end development, we have HTML, CSS, JavaScript. These are the main technologies. Okay. So HTML is there. HTML is the basic, gives the basic structure of the website. And CSS we use to style the web pages. Okay. So with just vanilla CSS, you cannot do much, right? So you can obviously do a lot, but like then like at certain point to make your development process productive, you have to use a CSS framework. Okay. So one of the frameworks which we use in our curriculum is called Bulma. Okay, you can also use Bootstrap. The reason why we choose Bulma is like it's easier than Bootstrap, lightweight, and then it looks good than Bootstrap. Bootstrap kind of looks boring nowadays. Then the third important component here in the front end is JavaScript. Okay, so you also need a front end framework like React. Just HTML, CSS, JavaScript is not required. You need a framework like React. Now, what React does is you can kind of like connect HTML and CSS using this framework, right? Instead of like doing it separately, it kind of like connects JavaScript and HTML. Okay, so this is about the front end. Okay, you can just instead of becoming a focusing on becoming a full stack developer, you can also just become a front end developer by learning React. Okay, React is like a most popular front end framework, and a lot of jobs are like available for React. Okay, but you should also understand how the backend works, because obviously you will be consuming the data which is coming from the backend. Right. So you will be consuming data in the front end, which is coming from the back end. Right. So you should also have a overall understanding of how backend works to like work good in front end also. Right. So in backend there are like a lot of languages. So in front end only JavaScript is mostly used. Okay. Most of the cases, but in backend like we can have multiple languages. Like you can have in Java, Python, C Sharp. Okay, there are a lot of languages which you can develop in, but since in front end you have learned a language JavaScript, so we can also use JavaScript in the back end. Okay, using a framework called Express. Okay, this Express framework is also like pretty popular, and multiple job opportunities are there. Right. So since we have already learned a language in like JavaScript, you can also use the same language in the backend instead of learning a new language. So this will make your learning process easier and faster. Okay, and you need a database like MongoDB. So initially, when you're trying to learn to code, like it is useful to I mean, like, easier to use MongoDB because it's very simple to use MongoDB in the initial stages, and also like a lot of companies use MongoDB like for scale, and like it also handles scale, right? So it's a good database to start off with, and also a good database to develop applications. Okay. And versioning and deployment. So this is what I told about Git and GitHub, where you need some versioning and like a place to collaborate. So when you're working on a project, you'll be working with multiple developers. So you have to collaborate on a project. So you need a tool called GitHub to collaborate on the project. And once you are done with the project, you need some platform to deploy. So these two platforms, Vercel and Render, have made deployment easier. Earlier few years back and all, it used to be like very difficult, right? So now these two platforms have made it easier. And Vercel you can use to deploy React apps, and Render you can React apps like in the front end, and Render you can use to deploy Express apps. So you can deploy backend apps in Render. So these are the technologies which you need to know to call yourself a full stack developer. Okay. And why we have chosen JavaScript, right? So JavaScript is in we have chosen because like we can use same language both in the front end and back end. So learning a new language is obviously like learning the syntax and learning the concepts of a particular language. Though multiple languages have same kind of core concepts, you have to get used to the syntax. There'll be like some shocks if you're learning a new language, which is not there, which won't be there in your previous first language, right? So language specific things. So initially, it is easier to start off with JavaScript, right? Because there are a lot of job opportunities also, both in the front end and back end, and it's like a single language you can develop both front end and back end. Okay. So obviously, when you're trying to learn to code, like there are multiple ways to do. So these 5 steps have is what like we have researched and come up with these 5 steps which you can use to like learn to code efficiently. So we'll start off with these 5 steps, then we will get into the actual concepts of the full stack web development. Okay. So the first one is called Pareto's principle, right? So this means that 20% of the efforts which you put give 80% of the results. To give an example, let's say you have a lot of friends, right? So 80% of your social time, 80% of your social time will be spent with 20% of your family or friends, right? So very small number of people will be there, like whom you spend the most of the time with. You can also use this example in your cupboard. So you will have a lot of clothes. Only 20% of the clothes you will be using 80% of the time. The other 80% of the clothes you will be using very small number of time. So Pareto's rule kind of applies in like multiple areas, right? So we also have Pareto's rule applied to learning a language or learning any technology, right? So if you take a particular language, every language will have data types. Every language will have some conditional operators like if else statements. Okay. And every language will have some loops like for loop, while loop, and all the languages have functions and classes. So these are the 20% percentage of the concepts which most of the languages have. And once you cover these concepts, right, you can do 80% of the things with that particular language. Okay. uh, so obviously you have to learn the other 80% also. We will get into when to learn this other 80% and how to learn this other 80%. But for now, if you are able to grasp this first 20% concepts, not just in language, in any framework like React or Express or like any like Bulma or CSS, HTML, the core 20% concepts, if you are covering, you can do 80% of the things with that. Okay. We will also see when to cover this other 80% concepts. Okay, so the second step is using analogies to learn concepts. Okay, so why this works is, let's say for an example, like there is a technology called Node.js. Now, if you Google Node.js, like you will get some explanation. So this is the explanation from Wikipedia. So it goes like this: Node.js is a cross-platform open source JavaScript runtime environment that can run on Windows, Linux, Unix, Mac OS, and more. Node.js runs on V8 JavaScript engine and executes JavaScript code outside a web browser. Now, when you're first reading this, you'll be like, what is this? Why this definition is there and why I'm not able to understand, right? So for most of the concepts here, when you're trying to learn to code, it will be like this. When you're first learning a concept, it will be like all these terminologies they will put, okay? So why you have to learn something which you don't understand for the first time? You can again come back to this explanation once you know what is Node.js, right? So we generally use analogies in our course, okay? So I also recommend you guys to learn with analogies, okay? Analogies basically, you'll try to learn something which you don't know, and you take something which you already know, you compare that with something which you don't know, and try to understand what is the thing which you don't know, right? So here we'll explain what is Node.js with the thing which we already know, okay? So you guys know what is working out on a treadmill, what is running on a treadmill, right? And also you know what is a human body, what all things it's capable of, okay? So let's say this lady is running on a treadmill, okay? So you can imagine there are two kinds of energies involved in this place, okay? So the first one is the core energy, as in the inbuilt or like the internal energy of the lady who's running on the treadmill, okay? So what this core energy is used for is let's say she has had some protein shake or something before the gym, okay? So that has to digest, so body has to spend some energy in digesting it, and obviously the heart has to beat, and the normal functions of the body has to keep on doing, okay? Subconsciously it has to work, okay? So that you can call it as the core energy, which gets used whatever happens outside, okay? So that is one energy layer, that is the core energy layer, okay? So you can also have one more energy layer which is spent specifically for running on the treadmill. That has nothing to do with the internal energy, the core energy, but that is being spent only on running on the treadmill, okay? Now you understand what is happening here. Someone is running and you can separate the energy into two layers, okay? Similarly, you have a computer, okay? Then on the computer, you have something like an operating system. Let's say you have a Windows computer, okay? So Windows is the operating system. Now operating system is same as the core energy of a person, which does normal things which the laptop has to do at the back end, running few processes for the computer, okay? Now you can imagine there is an additional micro OS. So this main OS is this Windows, and a smaller version of the OS, a layer on top of this OS, okay, which can only run JavaScript. Okay, this layer is specifically used to only run JavaScript. Okay, so that layer is called Node.js. Okay, you're understanding? So here the core energy is the OS, the operating system of your computer, and the additional smaller OS is just used to run JavaScript. Like how this smaller additional energy layer is just used to run, run on the treadmill. Similarly, this Node.js is used to run JavaScript. Okay. So this is an additional energy layer. Okay. So JavaScript is a runtime environment. Okay, to run JavaScript in server or computer. Now, obviously, you won't understand now also at this point, but you have a basic understanding of what Node.js is. Like once you build an app with using Node.js and Express.js, you will understand what is it completely. And when you come back and read this line, now you'll understand what they have written it here. Okay, so this is how you have to start learning with analogies and finally get back to the concepts. Okay. Now, the third step is to avoid rabbit holes. So when you're trying to learn to code, technologies have been developing for the past, I don't know, 70, 80 years, they have been developing since the computer has been introduced, right? So a lot of technologies and lot of rabbit holes are there. Rabbit hole as in once you take some concept, there'll be some sub concept in that which you can go deep. Okay, and there'll be another sub-concept within that which you can go deep. So if you spend like spend your time getting into these small sub-concepts and spending a lot of time in that, you won't achieve your goal of like getting to full stack. Okay, so we can take this example of this Bruce Lee quote. Okay, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. So we can use the same concept when you're like trying to learn, right? So for example, in JavaScript, there is a thing called asynchronous JavaScript. There's a thing called promises. Now promises evolved over the years, right? So first we used to like achieve the same results using callback, but some problems happened there, and 2010 some promises were introduced. Okay, and in 2013 then some concepts were introduced on top of promises, and in 2017 async await, which is like right now the most popular way to like write promises, and it is widely used, right? So when you're trying to learn in any course, you try to learn, some courses what they do is they teach you how to write callback functions, right, to handle promises. Then they use dot then they finally use async await, and they tell you can use this thing because this is what is popular now. Okay, so if you going to use this thing, why you have to learn the other things, the entire history, and like get confused on what to use, right? You have a limited energy to spend to learn to code. Okay, so stop going into this history of things and like learn what is like recent and what is widely used. Okay, just that. And once you learn this properly, right? So when you're going to a company and they're using dot then instead of async await, you can easily grasp that because you know this properly. But once you are like trying to learn everything at once, what happens is you won't learn any one thing properly. So again, like coming back to this quote, you take one particular way to do something and practice it nicely and like be confident and like become an expert in that. So whenever you are trying to learn the other thing which is similar to that, you will learn it easily. Similarly, like obviously, like you can compare this with languages also. So when you're trying to learn to code using JavaScript, try to stick to that till you learn the entire MERN stack. Okay, in between, don't try to switch to Ruby or like Python. Okay, that will slow down your process. Okay. The fourth and the main important thing is building projects. So when you're building projects, obviously you'll be like struggling to learn to build, Okay, so this struggling is actually the learning. Okay, so now we'll see why building projects is actually helpful. Okay, so what happens is like this is called Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So whenever you learn something, as time goes, right, after 1 hour, you will be remembering only 40% of what you have learned. Okay, so as time goes, you keep forgetting. Okay, so when you're trying to learn to code, right, you will do a lot of research on like the concepts. Okay, I have to use this or that, right? So constantly you will be like Googling and reading. So that gives spaced repetition. So you repeat learning the concepts, you learn them again and again. So the spaced repetition makes you retain the concepts better. Okay, when you're trying to build some projects. So building projects is very essential. That is the major learning part. Okay, then once you have built using some particular technology, now when you learn the actual concept, right, the textbook concept, you will understand what they're trying to tell. Okay, so this is the second benefit. Third benefit is you can learn the remaining 80% now, right? So when you're trying to build some project using WebSockets, initially you wouldn't have learned because it's not in the initial 20%. But when you're trying to learn some projects using WebSocket, you can learn that. Okay, because everything is an ocean, so you can learn everything based on the project. So this way you can learn the remaining 80% by building projects. Okay, and finally, one thing you have to remember is you can never reach 100% because there is so much to learn and you can never reach 100%, and also it is not required to reach 100%. Right. So right now we are communicating in English, right? There are like 170,000 words in English, 170,000 words in English. You cannot learn all the words, and you don't have to learn all the words. Okay, just with a few set of words, you will be able to communicate it very effectively, right? Even to a native English speaking person, you will be able to communicate it very effectively. So that is the point. Like the whole point is you don't need to know all the concepts, the 100%. So as and when some project demands some technology, you can learn it on the go. But the initial 20%, the foundation, that has to be strong when you're trying to learn, right? Then the fifth and another important point is getting a mentor. So why we need a mentor is you need to you'll get stuck at multiple points in when you're trying to develop, right? And when you have a mentor, you will have someone to like clear your bugs, or like he can tell you like learn this, learn that. Okay, don't learn this, it's not required, right? So these all things a mentor can guide you. So whenever you are trying to learn to code on your own also, you find some mentor and like try to be in touch with them. Okay, and the mentor will also motivate in your journey. So multiple times you will be like demotivated in like seeing the number of concepts you have to learn, right? So the mentor will like motivate you in a journey, and also like someone to hold you accountable. Okay, so when you're trying to learn on your own, there is no one to ask you why you didn't do this. So if the mentor is there, he will check up on you that have you completed this project, or have you learned this concept, something like that. So if someone is there like holding you accountable and asking you, did you do this, did you do that, so that will motivate you to complete projects and learn concepts and all. So getting a mentor is like another an important point when you're trying to learn to code. Okay, so now that we have covered these 5 points, right, of how to learn, we will get into the actual concepts. So I'll be sharing this recording with the slides at the end of the class, right? So you can also go through these concepts again. Now, how internet works, right? So we'll have a basic understanding of how internet works now. So let's say you go on Google Chrome, your web browser, and you type google.com. Okay, so this is the client. The browser is the client. Now what happens is you are essentially typing google.com and searching, but what happens is it actually gets searched for an IP address. Now, IP address is an address of a computer over the internet, right? So this address is an IP address. So this address is a server's IP address of Google. Google is having the server, and that server's IP address is this. So now the client or the computer, the browser reaches to this server requesting for google.com. Now the server responds with a set of files, okay, HTML, CSS, JavaScript files, and it sends it back to the client, the browser. Now the browser reads and shows these files in your thing. Okay, so this is how the basic like a system of like how internet works, right? So you need to know what is domain name, IP address, client, server, okay, and request and response. Okay, so this is the overview of like how computer works. Now let's get into HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Okay, so HTML is like, it tells the browser like it has to have a button at this point. Okay, so this is I think Netflix home pages. So there is a sign in button, right? So the HTML tells that you keep a button here. Okay, now CSS tells to the browser that you color this button in red color and you make the text in white color with some particular format, particular font. Okay, so this is what CSS tells. Okay, now what JavaScript tells is, now when you are like writing your username and password and clicking on sign in, the JavaScript tells what action to perform. Send these both username and password to the backend, something like that. So the JavaScript tells the browser what action to perform when the button is clicked. Okay, so this is an analogy, or like what exactly happens in a website, right? Now coming to HTML tags, there are few tags which you keep using most of the times. That is the HTML basic tags, HTML head, title, and body. These tags you have to understand. And post that, you have to know what is heading tags, like H1 to H6 headings are there, and a P tag. Okay, and list, anchor links. Anchor links are the A tags, image tag, div, input, and button. Okay, so these set of tags will be used most of the times. Then in CSS, you can go through box model and CSS flexbox or grid. Okay, any of these, both you can use. Okay, initially you learn only one, and then like you can use both also, right? Then CSS framework, as I said, like you can use Bulma or Bootstrap. basically don't spend too much time in CSS because it's a low impact technology, right? So at the end of the day, you need to know spend more time in React. So don't spend a lot of time in HTML, CSS. Like get to JavaScript and get to React, right? If you're like searching for a job, so React is like the front end job, then React is like the ultimate goal. So as soon as possible, you get to React, right? So if you're interested to know more about HTML, CSS, we have already conducted a batch last week, and these recordings and this live class recordings and this slides are there. So I'll share with you this slide, so you can go through that if you want to learn HTML and CSS. Okay. Now coming to JavaScript, so the first important thing is you need to declare variables. Okay. So variables, as in like you can declare in two ways, let and const. Okay, variable is what holds a value. When you're like working with values, variables is what hold a value. Two ways to declare, and there is another way called var, but we'll be using only let and const. Like these are the most used and the current used ways of like declaring a variable. Then basic data types, string, number, boolean, and undefined. Okay, composite data types like arrays and objects. So these things you can cover. And conditionals like if, else, for, and while loops. Okay, and prompt and alert. So this is JavaScript browser specific thing. So prompt is like a dialog box will open in the browser when you make some action. Okay, and like you can enter something. Alert is just an alert from the browser. Okay, so you can display some message there. And once this is done, you have to learn functions. So in JavaScript also there are multiple ways to declare functions, but you can like be thorough with how to use arrow functions. And once that is done, like you can read about what is callback functions and scope, what is block and scope. Okay, so these will get you to the basics. And once this is done, then you can get to the advanced, right? In advanced, like you can mostly focus on functional programming instead of class-based programming, because it is easier to get things done initially in the functional programming way. So if you take just array methods, right? So there are like around more than 50 methods. Okay, you don't need to learn all to like do things. These 8 methods are like enough for doing most of the things. Array methods: push, pop, shift, unshift, find, filter, map, and reduce. So these 8 methods you can learn. And once that is done, like you can learn string methods, right? String methods, as in like you can focus on how to convert a string to an array back to a string. Okay, so whenever you are like getting an input of a string, like you can always convert them to an array, do some manipulation, and again convert it back to a string and give the output, right? So this is one important thing you can do. And array and object destructuring and the variable references. So these concepts are like good enough for you to get to advanced level. Okay, and once this is done, like you can go ahead with DOM. Okay, so DOM, only basic DOM is enough, because most of the DOM stuff will be taken care by React. So don't try to go deep into DOM. Just keep it to the basics when you are learning. So DOM selectors. So there are 3 selectors which you can use: query selector all, and get element by ID. If you know what is CSS, for CSS we use selectors. We select HTML elements in CSS, so we use selectors. Similarly, in JavaScript, if you have to select an HTML element, you can use these selectors. So once you know what are selectors, and you can read about and like understand what are event listeners, specifically for input and button fields. So this is what you will be like mostly working on, like input and button fields. So you can study, you can like work on event listeners for input and button fields. Once this is done, the last part of JavaScript is asynchronous JavaScript, which is like very important to build full stack apps, right? So why we need asynchronous JavaScript is JavaScript is a single threaded language. Okay, so what does that mean is JavaScript can only do one thing at a time. It cannot do multiple things at a time. So to execute multiple things at a time, there has been few things designed inside the language, inside JavaScript, something like call stack and event loop. So this concept is also like an important concept during interviews. They'll ask what is a call stack and what is like an event loop and all, right? So you can learn about this and why JavaScript is designed in this way. Okay, once that is done, as I said, like you have to know what is promise and fetch API to fetch data using API and async await. So don't initially try to learn dot then and like use multiple ways of creating a promise. You can use async await because that has cleaner syntax. Then once that is done, like you can learn a concept called promise.all. It is good to know concept, but good to know. But initially, if you feel it is a little bit difficult, you can also skip this. This is useful when you want to make multiple API calls at the same time. Okay, this promise.all is required at that time. So once these concepts are covered, you can say that all these four kinds of like parts of concepts are covered. You can say that you are like decent enough, like an expert in like JavaScript, right? Then you can start moving to MERN stack. Okay, so before getting to MERN stack, we can like see what is Git and GitHub. Okay, and what is VS Code. So if you have used VS Code, you will know, but generally like VS Code can be compared to MS Word. Your Windows will have Microsoft Word, right? So VS Code can be compared to Microsoft Word, where you have a local application where you can write code in that. Okay, it is used to like write code in the local, and once that is done, you need to have something like Git. Okay, so Git is basically a version control system. If you have used Google Docs, Google Docs have this versions, right? So this particular document was edited by Sudeep on these days. Okay, and the current version was edited by some Burst Crew account and Sinoprem. Okay, so these are the different versions on different dates, and who has edited that version, who has typed that version. So this kind of like a version history is what Git provides. So you need to have multiple versions of the project. As you keep updating your app, you will have multiple versions of the project, and that versions can be managed using a thing called Git. Okay, and GitHub is similar to Google Docs. If you know Google Docs, you can like collaborate on Google Docs with multiple people. Let's say you create a Google Doc, you can share it with others, so the other person can also type in your document, and you can see what he is like typing and what he has changed from previously. So GitHub is similar to Google Docs. So VS Code is similar to Microsoft Word. Git is similar to the version history of Google Docs, and GitHub is the Google Docs. Okay, so once this analogy is done, you need to know Git commands, right? So there are like a lot of Git commands, but these are the most useful when you are trying to learn to code. Git init to create a new initialize a Git repository. Git clone. Okay, so Git clone, what it does is, once you have a project in GitHub, Git clone will copy that project to your local. Okay, and Git add is once you have made some changes in the local, you can do Git add to add those changes. And Git commit is like now once you add, you need to commit those changes to create a new version. Okay, then Git status is to check what all files you have changed and like what is the current status of your project. Git remote add is like add a new remote repository. So from your local, you can use Git remote add to add a new repository from GitHub to your local. Okay, then Git push is like you can once you have committed the changes, you have to use Git push to commit your local files to the GitHub. So you can use Git push. If you use Git push in VS Code, it will push all the code here to GitHub. Okay. Then Git pull is like pulling the changes from GitHub to VS Code. That's the opposite of Git push. Okay, so these commands you can like know. These commands are like more than enough when you are like trying to learn to code. Okay, now coming to the frameworks like the MERN stack, right? So MERN stack stands for MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. Okay, so let's go from backend to frontend. Okay, so what is MongoDB? MongoDB is a database. We will see more about MongoDB in a while. Okay, so MongoDB is a database. You can imagine MongoDB as a cupboard with lot of boxes. Okay, and lot of rows, and each row has multiple boxes, and within each box you can place a piece of paper. You can write something on the paper and place some piece of place some piece of paper inside the box. Okay, so this entire cupboard is called MongoDB, like that you can imagine. Okay, now what is Express? Express is backend. It's the server. Okay, but if you want to see what is understand what is Express in an analogy, Express is the person who monitors or who guards this kind of like a cupboard. So let's say this is a library. This person is the librarian. So he kinds of like protects or like guards the library on like what kind of document, what kind of pieces of paper should go where, and like how to organize it. Okay, so Express does that. Okay, now this is the front end. Front end is the thing which is like the user interacts with. Let's say this front end is like some kind of a poster. So React is what holds the poster. Okay, it's the front end. Now something happens in the front end. What happens is, we saw, right, when something happens in the client or the browser, a request is getting sent to the Express. Okay, let's say someone has entered hello. Now you want to store the hello here in the database. What happens is, when someone has entered hello and asked it to store it to DB. Now what happens is, the hello is taken in the body, okay, of this request. Let's say you can imagine the request as a person. So he runs from the front end to the back end, carrying this hello message. Now the Express sees, okay, I have to store this hello message in the DB. Okay, now what it does is, okay, I have to store it in this particular cupboard, in this particular box I have to store. So he will decide on where to store based on the information which he's getting, and he will store that. And once it is stored, what the librarian will do is, he will send a message back to the front end that successfully stored. So again, that message will be attached to the body of the response. Okay, so this person again goes back to the front end, and he will show to the front end that this particular hello message is successfully saved. Okay, so this is how the entire like MERN stack or like the full stack things work, right? So this is just one example. So you can like extrapolate the same analogy for everything. Okay, for whenever you're trying to learn. Now, MongoDB is called a NoSQL database. Okay, so what is an SQL and what is a NoSQL database? Again, like, come to give an example. Google Sheets or like Excel files, which are arranged in rows and columns. Okay, so let's say we want to store data of a user, and we need to store three data points about a user. First is name, second is date of birth, and third is email. Okay, so there are two users right now, John Doe, Elizabeth Smith. Okay, their date of birth and their emails. Okay, so if you're storing everything, all the data in terms of rows and columns in a table format, that is SQL. Okay, if you're storing it in a document format like this, okay, document format can be like Microsoft Word or like Google Docs. Okay, so here the name is John Doe. Okay, date of birth is 13 and email is this, and within curly braces. So this denotes one data set. And for Elizabeth Smith, we have another data set. So storing it in this kind of format. Okay, this format is you can say it's kind of like JSON format, right? So this kind of format is called a NoSQL format. Okay, so MongoDB is a NoSQL database. Okay, and if you take SQL or like MySQL or PostgreSQL, they store it in this table format, and MongoDB stores in a document format. That is the only difference. Basically, at the end of the day, you are storing data in the database and retrieving the data whenever you want it. Okay, so both has same use cases, just the way they store data is different. That is the difference, right? Now coming to the folder structure of React and Express. Okay, so React and Express don't enforce some, you have to follow this kind of structure in your projects. But what we have thought through, and like we have come up with these kind of like a folder structure, which is like makes sense when you're trying to learn to code. Obviously, when in each company, they'll follow a different kind of like a structure. But once you understand this, like any company you go, you can figure out, okay, what kind of like a format or a structure they're following for the apps, right? So if you take Express app, you will have an index.js file. Okay, so this is the entry point to your Express app. Okay, and the next thing is package.json. This contains all the packages and the script, the libraries which you use in your Express app. And routes is what it communicates between the front end and the DB. Okay, routes folder is what it communicates between the front end and the DB. Models is where you define models and schema. We will get into what is models and schema in a while. Okay, so this is the structure of a backend Express application. The front-end Express application will again have app.jsx. This is the entry point to our front-end. And package.json file, this will contain all the packages and scripts, the libraries which you are using in the React app. And providers is this kind of like a folder will be what communicating to the backend. So here routes will be communicating between front-end and the DB. Providers will communicate with the backend. And components is where you define like what are the user interfaces, like what the user should see. Okay, so these kind of folder structure makes sense when you're like initially learning, right? And this can also go a long way when even to build like complex applications. Okay, coming to database models and schema. I already mentioned that MongoDB, you can imagine it as a cupboard, right? So now what is model and what is a schema? Okay, so model is, let's say you are building a college portal. So you need to have two cupboards. One cupboard will store all the courses offered in the college. The second cupboard will store all the students who are enrolling for the courses. Okay, so if you take this course model, this cupboard is called the course model. Okay, so model is basically cupboard. This cupboard is called student model, which has all the student data. Okay, now within the course model, you have multiple rows, right? You have multiple rows to like organize these boxes. Okay, so each row will have one course, and here each row will have one student. Okay, so what all things to store about a course? Okay, so first is course name is required and course description is required. Okay, here what all things you need to store like a student name, for example, and what all courses he takes. Okay, so this thing is called schema, like what data you should store about a course, that is called schema, and what data you should store about a student, that is called student schema. So this is the course schema and this is the student schema. So model is basically the cupboard. Okay, here we have two cupboards, course cupboard and a student cupboard. And schema is basically what data points you want to store about each course or each student. Okay, course schema gives what all details you want to store about course. Student schema gives what all details you want to store about a student. So this is an example of like analogy of what is model and a schema. Okay, now we saw what is we saw routes, right, in the backend, which communicates with the front end and the DB. Okay, so now let's say you get some data from the front end. Let's say you get hello and you want to store it in the course. Okay, to give a better example, you get a course name called full stack JavaScript. Okay, so the course name is MERN and the course description is full stack JavaScript. So this data someone has entered, some student has entered in the front end and you are getting it in the back end. Okay, now you need to first find which cupboard to store it. So root is what gives which cupboard to store it. So basically like the root is, you can imagine like an actual route the librarian has to take to reach this cupboard, this course model cupboard, and a method he needs. Okay, so post method means like you store the data. So from the front end, he has gotten MERN and JavaScript. So these are like courses, course name and course description. So he will go to the course model cupboard, okay, and he will place these two things in their respective courses. So this is what route and a post method is, right? Now let's see some React concepts, right? So the first and most basic React concept is component. Okay, so component is basically what the user sees in the front end in the browser. Okay, so this is how a component is defined, right? A const component. This is how a function is defined. So we have the same functional structure to create a component, and it returns some value called hello. So when this component is being rendered, it will show hello. Okay, so this is a component. So component is basically a part of a website, what the user sees. Okay, so this is the most basic concept in React. Okay, then the next important thing is React hooks. Okay, so there are 15 hooks in React, which are like which you can use. Like, so React nowadays React applications are developed using React hooks only. Okay, so we don't need to know all the 15 hooks. Like as I mentioned before, as and when the project demands, you can use the hook. But these 3 hooks are enough to do most of the things when you're trying to learn. Even like complex applications, like let's say you're building a Facebook clone, you can build with just these 3 React hooks. Okay, so let's see what are the 3 React hooks. The first is useState. Okay, so first let's say an example, like why useState is even required. Okay, so if you see, this is a variable name. Okay, a course name, it is empty now. Okay, so there is nothing here. And what is given here is, what this means is, when someone types the course name on the input field, you store the course name here in this variable. It's simple. Initially, keep an empty string as the course name, and when someone types the course name in this input field, store the course name in this variable. Okay, so this is how a variable is declared in JavaScript, right? But useState is again the same way. This is the syntax of useState hook. Okay, the course name and set course name is the function to change the course name variable, right? It also does the same thing. But why you even need a useState hook is, whenever you are declaring a normal variable called MERN, and it's supposed to show the course name down. Okay, so if you are using a normal variable, the course name won't be shown down. Okay, but if you are using useState, the course name will be shown down. Basically, what is useState is, useState refreshes the component every time something is changed. Okay, normal variable doesn't change the component, it doesn't refresh the component. Okay, so when you're using useState, it refreshes the component, and whenever you type something here, it gets automatically it gets appeared here. Okay, so this is the difference between useState and a variable, JavaScript variable. Okay, now useContext and providers. This is again the second hook, which is like very useful. Okay, so when you're developing an application, right, React application, you will have lot of components. As we saw in our HTML course, like you will have a navbar component. Okay, you will have some postcard component. Okay, and you will have some other card as the component. So whenever you are developing React applications, you will have multiple components. Okay, data from one component should and like sometimes will be used in other component. So this transferring data from one component to other component is difficult. It is like it's a difficult process. So this useContext hook and the providers make our life easier. So what happens is, let's say you have 5 components. Okay, and what you can do is, you can have a common place where like you can store all the data of these 5 components here. Okay, so this is called a provider. Okay, so what happens is, you can store the data in a common place, and whenever like some component needs some data, you can just give the data to that component. Okay, so this is what a provider is. And the thing is, like useContext hook makes the provider provide this data to the 5 components. Okay, so here I only have 2 components. Let's say I have component 1 and component 2. Okay, both show different things. Okay, so what the provider does is it provides the data to the components. Okay, so this is what a provider is, right? Then the third hook is called useEffect hook. So useEffect hook is, you can see this image, right? useEffect is like a person who is observing the app. Okay, so who's observing for some changes. So whenever something changes, she does something. Okay, she keeps observing few things in an app, and let's say you have instructed that when this changes, you go and do something else. So useEffect is basically that, some observer, and it observes and it does something. Okay, so this is a syntax of useEffect. So this function is what it should run, and when it should run, when it keeps observing data 1 and data 2. Okay, when data 1, either data 1 or data 2 changes, useEffect runs this function. It is simple. useEffect hook is this. Okay, so these are the 3 hooks which are like which will make you like go up to like even build like complex applications with React, right? Once the 3 hooks are like mastered, other 12 hooks, like out of the 15 hooks right now, you can learn them like easily. You can relate and learn them easily, right? But these 3 hooks, you have to learn them like properly, right? Then the next part which you want to cover is CRUD. So generally you must have heard this names called CRUD apps, right? You have to build CRUD apps. Okay, excuse me. So CRUD actually means create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so create means create data in the database. Read R is read data from the database. Yeah, I'll answer their questions like once at the end of the session. Okay. Um, so creates data in the database, reads the data from the database, updates the data. Like once the data is stored, you can update the data, and delete the data from the database. Okay. So as we saw in the previous example, right? So let's say some data has to be created. Let's say some hello is entered, or like some course name is entered. Okay. Let's say this course name MERN is entered, and this has to be stored in the database. Now it will be entered in React. That data is attached to the body of the request. Now request is a person who runs from the front end to the back end. He'll carry this data. Now Express gets the data. Okay, and Express will see, okay, I have to put this data at this cupboard. Okay, so it will put the data at the respective cupboard. Okay, so this is what creating means. Reading means, again, like what happens is the Express app gets the data from the DB, it attaches to the response, and it goes to the front end, and the front end can display what the data is. Okay, updating is again similar. When someone updates the data, it again goes in the body. Express sees like, okay, I have to update this data, so it will take the old data and put the new data. Delete is simple. It just Express just removes the particular data from the database. Okay, so CRUD apps makes you most of the apps, right? So they'll be like based on this CRUD principles. Like every app will have create, read, update, and delete. Okay. Coming to Yeah, so if the question is about like whether we are covering context API or Redux, so we are covering context API here. Okay. So context API can manage global state for most of the conditions, right? You'll be building like decently complex apps. So for that, like context API is enough. Redux is Redux is an overkill at this point, right? So whenever you are joining a company as a React developer, so when the application is like very complex and it has to manage lot of states together, so that time you will need something like Redux, and that time you will also have lot of people to collaborate with. Okay, right now whatever apps you are building, Redux could be an overkill. It's like you are trying to nail something in the on a table. Let's say you want to nail something on the table, just an hammer is enough right now, right? You don't need what, like a big like a hammering machine, like an hammering machine like which you see in construction sites, right? You don't need it to like you need it for nailing something on the table. Okay, so most of our use cases, like this context API is enough. Okay, so coming to authentication and authorization. Okay, so once the CRUD is done, right, in your learning, the next step is to cover authentication and authorization. And this is like a very important part because this is what makes your application secure. Now, what this authentication is, when you're going to a website, you sign up, you enter your username and password. Okay, so the browser sends this data to the backend. Okay, and the backend verifies whether backend verifies and checks who's this user and whether he has entered the correct username and password. So this, once that is done, the user is authenticated. He is let into the app to do things. Okay, once the authentication is done, you need something called authorization, right? So to easily explain this, let's say you have Google Docs, right? So I have a Google Doc and I created the doc, so I am the owner of the doc. Okay, now I am giving the access to 3 more people in my team. Okay, so Anjali has an editor access. Okay, and she's having the editor access, so she can edit the document. So this person Brahmam, he is having only commenter access, so he can only comment on the document. And Gautam has only view access. Okay, so he can only view the document. He cannot comment or he cannot edit the document. So these are the various access levels. So authorization is giving various access levels to different people based on who they are. Okay, so this is the basic explanation of authentication and authorization. Now in authentication, you will have to know what is hashing. Okay, so basically hashing is a way to convert one text into another text. Okay, so if you see password, so someone's password is ABC123, which is like a very bad password to keep, right? So what is hashing is, hashing converts this text ABC123 into this random text. Okay, so hashing is this converting one text into some other value. There are various ways to hash. Okay, you don't have to get into this like deep when you're like trying to build applications. You don't need to get into like how the thing is hashed, but you have to know what is hashing. And hashing is one way, means once you hash this to this, you cannot get back from this to this, because that is a way to make our things secure. And in your database, when you're like, when some user signs in, like you are creating a web application, and when user signs into your app, you don't store the actual password in the database. That is not a secure thing to do. What you will do is you will hash that password and store this hash in the database. You don't store the actual password in the database, right? So any database administrator can see the password, and he can like do it. He can like log in place of this user, right? So so generally the passwords are hashed and stored in the database. And hashing is one way, means once you have a password and you hash it, it cannot be hashed back. And the second important concept is JSON Web Token. Okay, so why we need a JSON Web Token, right? So every request which is sent from the front end to the back end, the back end has to know who is sending that request, because the back end won't have an idea who sent the previous request and who is sending this request. Okay, so we need something like a token. Okay, so what this token is, token, you can imagine it as a safe. Okay, within that safe, a user's username and password is stored. Okay, so this is how it works. Let's say the user comes to the app the first time and he enters the username and password. Okay, and he logs in. So the username and password are sent to the server the first time. Okay, the server knows that, okay, this is the user. Now every time I cannot send the username and password for every request. So what the server does is, the server makes a safe. Okay, the safe server creates the safe and it puts the username of the safe inside, and it locks the username. Okay, so the key is with the server now. What happens is it sends this lock back to the browser, and this lock is stored in the browser. Okay, now every time a request is being sent, any kind of button or any kind of request is being sent from the front end to the back end, with every request this save block goes to the express app, to the backend. Okay, now the key is only the only key is being held by the server. The server can only open the safe. So every request it will get some safe. It will open the safe using the key which it has. It reads who's the username. Okay, and he'll see, okay, now this is the username. So whatever this user has, whatever this user has stored in the data, only that data it will take and send it to the front end, right? So JSON Web Tokens is basically a token. So every time you cannot keep sending username and password for every request and response. So when first time someone logs in, okay, so the server gives a token. So with every request, the token is being sent to the server, so it knows who's that user. Okay, so once the token what happens is every time, every 1 day or something, based on the app, the token gets refreshed. So when you go to the app next day, you have to again log in. So even if someone steals the token, they won't be able to log in into your app. So this makes things secure. Okay, so this is about JSON Web Token. Okay, so now we have come to the last part of the thing, deployment, right? So once you have built all the full stack web applications, right, React and Express, okay, and you also have a database. Now you want to deploy it to a server. Okay, so basically why you need a server? So basically server is a computer over the internet. Okay, what is deployment is, you have created your apps. Let's say this is HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Basically you have a React app and a Express app. So what you can do is you can install that app in the server. So that is called deploying. You are installing or you are uploading the your apps to the server, right? And whenever someone visits your web application, this server responds with these files, right? The server is always on and it responds based on the request. So you are basically installing your applications in the server, and any user who visits your web application can interact with your server and basically get data or put data into your application, or other things. You can interact with your application. So installing or uploading your applications to a computer on the internet, which is on 24/7, is called deployment. Okay, now in our particular course, like, we'll be using Vercel and Render. These platforms, as I said, has made deployment process extremely simple, right? So you can deploy your front-end apps in Vercel and back-end Express apps in Render. Okay, and once this is done, so any person on the internet can access your web application, and they can interact with your web application. Okay, so this is what I wanted to cover. So I have touched upon all the concepts which are like required for you to like get from a beginner to a like a good level in as a full stack developer, right? So with this only you can, like, if you're in college, with this much knowledge is enough for you to become a developer, initial fresher developer, right? So these concepts are like enough for you to get a job. If you have campus placements, you can like build apps with these concepts only, and like you can show it to your recruiter that these concepts I know and these all the things I've built, and like you can like easily get a job, right? So yeah, these are the concepts which are enough now. Okay, and I have just touched upon the concepts which we actually cover in course, right? So a few concepts which we actually cover in our course, and obviously there are more, but these concepts, when you're trying to learn, you will have a basic roadmap to like get to full stack development. Okay, so I will share the recording and this slides with you in our WhatsApp group. and you can use this if you are trying to learn on your own. You can use this roadmap to learn things. Okay. Coming to the course. So we are starting a batch on February 12th. Okay, so we teach these full stack concepts in our batch. Okay, the classes will be live, and I'll be the main instructor in the live classes. Obviously, we have other set of instructors who will help in like doubt sessions, and when you're stuck with bugs, like they'll help you in that, in resolving that, right? And these are the concepts which we will cover in the full stack course. And some of these concepts I've explained in today's session. Okay. This is also shared in the group. You can go through what all concepts we cover. The classes are between 9 to 10, like how it is happening now. It will happen 3 days a week. So most probably it will be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 10 p.m. will be the classes. The entire duration of this full stack course will be 3 months. Okay. And we have a quick doubt and bug support. So we will create a separate WhatsApp group in that the learners can chat. So right now the current WhatsApp group is big. It is having around 230 members or something. So we don't have the access. You guys don't have the access to message on this WhatsApp group. But for this particular course, we will have an open WhatsApp group where like the students can message the mentors and quickly get the doubts resolved, right? And also like for this free course also, a lot of people had raised doubts in the Google form, and we got into one-on-one calls and we resolved those bugs. Okay. So that is how the bug support will work. So this is essentially very important, right? So whenever you are trying to learn to code, you'll get stuck a lot, and without someone, right, you will be lost somewhere, and you will get demotivated. Like why I'm getting stuck with bugs, right? So to push past that initial level, you need a mentor. Right. So if you can find a proper software developer, you can also like ask him to like, can you become a mentor for me, right? If he's ready to help and all, like people will be really ready to help, like when you are like trying to ask for help. And once the course is done, we'll provide a certificate. The batch starts on 12th February, and this is the price. 1899 is the price. Then another FAQs. So the medium of the classes will be in English. Will this course provide any placement support? No, for this particular course, we don't have any placement or internship support. If you are in your third year or something, this course will really help you in your college placements. So a lot of we have conducted this kind of course before. So in that course, like people who have taken that course have gotten placed in their college placements even before their friends. So that much kind of like a promise we can give, right? So whenever like college placements happens, you will be placed even before your friends. With respect to software development roles, what if I encounter bugs or errors? So obviously we have a dedicated WhatsApp group we will have, and we also offer one-on-one live and video calls. Okay. Can non-college students apply for this course? So this course is specifically designed for college students, right? So others, please don't like apply for this course. Are the live sessions recorded for later access? Yes, we provide recorded lectures of the live sessions which are happening. Do you have a free trial? So we conducted this batch HTML CSS batch last week. So you can see the recordings here and the slides here. Okay, kind of like similar format will what we follow, and lot of students have actually submitted the final project, and it is very good to see a lot of students take the free course also seriously, and they have submitted the final projects, and we have issued them the certificates. Then what projects we built in this course, like there are a lot of small projects, but the major projects will be weather app. Okay, you will be using weather app API and JSON placeholder API apps, right? And we'll be building a proper college courses portal, like where the students can see other students and what all courses they are taking. And the final major project is a Facebook clone. So here, like we will have both the front end and back end, right? Like we will have like posting, editing post, updating post, deleting post, authentication and authorization, and likes, and like most of the core features of Facebook we'll be building here, right? And for this course, for this thing, we need promise.all, like the we need to know how to make multiple API calls to the backend. So that also we'll be like covering here, along with other small projects. So if you have any doubts, you can DM us on this number, 9524227932, or this PDF is shared. You can click on the link; it will directly land on this number. Okay. So yeah, pretty much that is it. So if you guys are interested, you can take up the full stack course, which is starting next Monday. Okay. So I'll stop sharing my screen. If you guys have any doubts, you can ask me in the Q&A. You cover Redux also in the course. No, I think this was asked, right? So we cover context API in the course to manage global state. Any other questions you guys have with respect to whatever, like even talked about, not about the course, but just the concepts which we covered? Okay, so if there are no questions, then I think we can wrap up the session. So whoever has attended the session, thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, I'll see you in another masterclass in some other topic. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, guys.